Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining this day after Easter. One of my great pleasures to talk with Simon. And I just, really want to grill Simon about why he spent so many years supporting Republicans who end up with a president who on Easter sends a message that looks like it came from the son of Sam's, pen. Good Lord. That we've come to this. But Simon, I hope you had a great weekend.
I did. It was warm in DC. I got a lot of gardening in. It was important for sanity purposes. Gardening keeps me grounded and sane in these tumultuous times.
Yeah, I think those connections to life become ever more important as we become disconnected from reality elsewhere. Look, let me just ask you this, Simon. How in God's name is this not going to be just a total wipeout for Republicans in November? What is it that Republicans are going to say? Am I missing something here? Are we not headed to 40 seats in the House?
Yeah, I think that I wrote a piece on Friday saying things are bad now for Republicans, but they're about to get a lot worse, actually.
So you knew he was going to threaten war crimes and put out that message on Easter,
No, I think that if you just assess the data from the last few weeks, what's been remarkable is that public opinion data and even kind of the economic data in the first couple of weeks of the war was people thought it might end quickly, and so they were reserving judgment. And then really in the last 10 days, public opinion has turned unbelievably sharply against both the war and against Trump. And he's seen a precipitous decline in polling of all kinds, independent polling and Republican polling. We've seen now Senate polling showing us ahead in Alaska, Democrats ahead in Alaska, in Ohio, in North Carolina, Maine, competitive in Iowa and Texas. The map all of a sudden, like what looked like a rough kind of, and then the Gallup data for the first quarter had the party ID jumping for Democrats being up by 10 points in party ID, which is a 14-point shift from where it was at the end of 2024. Huge shift and a huge lead Democrats opening up, at least in this one measure. So, Stuart, what's important is that I think that people kind of our head around the war was, let's see how it goes. It could end quickly. Things might snap back. But that hasn't happened. The public opinion has broken sharply. But the second thing that I think is about to happen, and I've been writing about this a lot in the last week, is that we're going to start getting the March economic data. And the CPI that's coming out on Friday, the nowcast as it's called, has the CPI increasing almost a full percentage point in 1 month, which would be over 10% annual rate increase in inflation on Friday. If that happens, and if that nowcast is correct, and we've already seen the GDP numbers now go from over 3 down to 1.6, like what's starting to happen is that all the projections and all the data around the economy are starting to get darker and more ominous and more dangerous for our economy and for our country. The sort of a before and after moment could be this Friday, with the CPI number coming in at a higher annualized rate than even it was under Biden at any point. And during the Ukrainian war, either when Russia attacked Ukraine. So I think to your point, like things were bad for the Republicans before the war. They've gotten an awful lot worse. And one sign of the panic has been Trump's, EO last week, executive order, basically putting the post office in charge of, the elections and all the other insanity that was in it. That's all going to be, is already being sued. But the other thing that happened today, Stuart, and you should talk about this, the Senate Republican super PAC just announced a $342 million buy in March in 8 states, including Alaska, Iowa, Ohio, Maine, North Carolina. It's mostly defense. There is some wishful thinking offense in there too, which they had to do just for cover. But this is a gargantuan buy. And this early, and it's all TV, by the way. It's reserving ad time probably through the election. I didn't get the details, but you're starting to see these kinds of signs of panic emerging in the electoral class of the Republican Party, who still have their jobs as you used to have of getting candidates elected and winning in tough places. And so, yeah, I think that they are. But it also means, I think, if I could add one other point, that the impetus for illicit ways of staying in power without winning the election outright, which he did in 2016 with his conspiracy, his open collaboration with the Russians, and he tried to do in 2020 and 2021, the chance that there are now extraordinary things that he may try to do to retain power, given how the bottom is falling out politically and economically for him and the Republican Party, those rise. And those are things we can talk about in this discussion.
Yeah, look, I just want to say that on behalf of the Brotherhood of Political Consultants, I am glad that the Republican Senatorial Committee is this dedicated to building new beach houses for this oppressed class of political consultants. Because I can tell you, if they're buying ads in March, April, May, it's not going to mean squat come November. It is basically, I think you would call it like a proof of life.
Yeah.
Like, we're still here, God damn it,
and imagine that of the 8 states they're spending money in, 5 of them, they're not in Texas yet, and they haven't really come to terms with the calamity that's happening in Texas, because Paxton is now ahead in every poll and is now favored to win there. And Tallarico is raising incredible amounts of money and showing himself to be a very capable candidate. And so Texas could also be in play, which is another couple $100 million of defense that they're going to have to spend in Texas. The fact that they are spending money this early in Alaska, Iowa, North Carolina, Maine, and Ohio is a sign that the battlefield has shifted and they're playing defense, we're playing offense. And it just shows also to everyone in Washington wondering whether or not the Senate is in play. Well, this is confirmation. The Republicans are deeply worried about what they've seen in the last few weeks.
Yeah, that's pretty much a primal scream of panic. They're going to put a Munch painting up there on top of the Senatorial Committee. Take down the painting of Donald Trump and put up the Munch paintings. Just to sort of take a step back. In the last week, 8 days, shorter. Yeah, the President of the United States gloating over the death of an American hero, Robert Mueller. In one of the most despicable acts of a public act of a president imaginable. And then you have him coming out with this insane Easter post. Which is doubly insane because you have a great moment here where the country wants to celebrate and remind ourselves that, here we have this extraordinary, brave men and women that put their lives on the line, who can do extraordinary things, who put a greater good over self. This is something to be celebrated. And he can't even allow that to happen because it wouldn't be about him. It would be about some people who actually didn't dodge the draft, who actually did serve, who actually, unlike him, Trump hates the military. And that's been clear since he attacked John McCain. And, there's always these moments you go like, that should have ended it. That the John McCain thing should have ended this. When he said that, war heroes are people who hadn't been captured. I wonder what he would have said if, this had gone the other way and this airman had been captured. It just shows. And then you have the ICE arrest coming in and putting in handcuffs a woman who's about to graduate from college, who's like a biochemist, married to a soldier about to be deployed. There's something deeply, deeply sick here. You look at the people around Trump, and they're obviously really troubled, sad, disturbed people. And I just keep going back to this, Simon, it's not like these people woke up in 2015 and wanted to be involved in presidential politics. We just never would let them in.
Right. No, that's
Who the fuck would?
right.
I
The
mean,
immigration people, by the way, Stephen Miller, I've worked on the immigration issue the last 20 years. Stephen Miller and these guys around Miller, the restrictionists, they were always like on the absolute fringe of the Republican Party
the
up
guy's like
until Trump, right? Yeah.
screaming, and
Yeah.
then they're just horrible people. They're not people you would want to sit next to on a plane, much less like engage. And they have these deep, damaged pathologies. I mean, go back and look at the Stephen Miller high school tapes. That there are Stephen Miller high school tapes is telling enough. And they're now really representing America. And you think about it. How in beyond politics, how corrosive is this to the national identity? You have the vice president of the United States who's flying to a former satellite country to support the Russian candidate
In the middle of a war, and the economy cratering and gas prices exploding.
Going to Budapest after the Russian tanks moved in to support Russia.
Yeah, I think the Vance trip this week, it will be interesting to see if he actually goes, right? Because he has a reason not to go, which is the war. But it's among the most disgraceful moments
absolutely
in our history, and it means the stain of Trump now has been fully applied to Vance, because this is something he's doing affirmatively in a time when he could have easily had an out here because of the war. And it's an affirmation that Vance is as venal and malevolent and malicious and dangerous as Trump is, if there's any question about that.
I mean, there's something sick, something deeply wrong with J.D. Vance as a person. I mean, Viktor Orban gave this speech, which was so beyond the pale that his own people in his own administration resigned in 2022 when he went out and talked about blood and soil, about how we did not want to mix races, which of course, CPAC then immediately invited him to come lead their right. Great. The guys for ethnic purity. We're there, dude. Come and talk to us. So here's a guy who he did this when he went to Germany and campaigned for this, that his own family would not be considered full citizens. That the ethnic purity of this, what we used to celebrate in America, this Indian American family. How do you, if you won't defend your own family? I mean, he's against the 14th Amendment and his wife's a citizen because of the 14th Amendment. And I don't know. I mean, there's just something so wrong with it that it requires, I think, levels of introspection and asking ourselves, what does it mean that we could do this? And really, you can't both sides this. It's Republicans.
Well, and I think part of what I've been speculating, commenting on, is whether or not we're approaching a moment for something like a national unity government. And I know that what I'm about to say is going to sound really crazy to some people, but we're in a crazy time and we can't forestall any options. And what I mean by that is that the Democrats and the Republicans find some kind of rough way of working together. It won't be perfect. We're not in a parliamentary system. Our system doesn't really allow something exactly like what I'm describing. And so it would have to be, but we started to see a version of that. We saw a version of that when the House and Senate voted unanimously to release the Epstein files against Trump's lobbying. And it was what may have been the most significant repudiation of a sitting president legislatively in our history. We saw it when the House and Senate Democrats and Republicans came together to voted to repeal the tariffs, right? Where a complete rejection by Congress, both chambers, of the core of his domestic economic agenda. And then we may have seen another iteration of this just in the last few days when, faced with Trump's demands that they fully fund DHS and include the SAVE Act in the legislative package. Leader Thune said no to both. And in a unanimous vote in the Senate, they repudiated the president and voted to do a partial funding of DHS without ICPP and nothing for SAVE. And then after rejecting that, Mike Johnson now has come to support it. So Mike Johnson's now put the speakership with Thune on a legislative approach that is essentially a fundamental repudiation of what Trump was demanding. And Trump is now sort of adjusted and accommodated. But I think that for the good of the country, what we have to start pushing our leaders to think about is not waiting to gain power in January of next year, but to do something now, because the damage that's being done to our global reputation, to our economy, to the economy of the world. I mean, we're going to start seeing Asian nations running out of fuel. Fuel rationing is already happening all over the world, not here because we're a large energy producer. But, this is becoming a grave crisis, this energy crisis in many countries in the world. There will be a food and scarcity problem this year because of what Donald Trump has done. And we also have the challenge now where this lunatic, this madman, has put us in a position where Russia and Iran are basically in charge of the global economy now. They control the Strait of Hormuz. And this is not just Iran, right? I mean, Iran's most significant patron has been Russia. Yeah. And now we have Russia and Iran having, so the idea that there's kind of any easy way out of this. I mean, just today, before we came on here, Iran rejected the ceasefire proposal coming from these intermediaries because they believe they have the upper hand here and that they are now the dominant power in the region. They've stared down the great American Satan, as they call it, and they've become they've achieved something very significant while we have fucked up in ways that, this is to me the greatest fuck up by a president in all of our history with nothing even remotely close to it. And that we're now at a point where, Iran and Russia have control over our economy and what's going to happen to the United States. How did he get us as a nation? You asked, where are we? Part of what our leaders need to do is we need to get out of this crisis. He can't pull out because it leaves Russia and Iran in charge of the world. We can't do a military strike because it's not necessarily going to be successful. And there's only 14% support for an escalation of the war. There's no public support for this. 28% of the country supports the war at this point. And so those two options are not easy and simple options. And so what it's going to require is a set of negotiations with our global partners and Iran that's going to be very costly for us. Iran has already said that the condition for any agreement is full reparations for everything that we've damaged. Hundreds of billions of dollars they're asking for of direct payment from the United States to Iran for any kind of ceasefire or peace agreement. So what's facing Trump, the third option, is something deeply costly to the United States, to him personally, and will be, a deep form of humiliation for him, weakening him further internationally. It's why I think that we're getting close to a point where the keys do have to be taken away from him, that he can no longer drive the car. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how we get there, but we only get there if we try, right? That's the whole point about any of these kinds of things. If we don't make an effort, if there aren't discussions going on across party and across chambers, then we won't get there because the damage he could continue to do to us. Garrett Graff had a column today about whether Trump was getting ready to use a nuclear weapon in Iran, right? This could get worse, not better. And it's why our leaders need to be far more forceful and aggressive in trying to challenge and rein him in, as, by the way, we did successfully with ICE. Look what happened, right? I mean, we went and battled with Trump over ICE reforms. We've prevailed, at least so far, in that battle. He's clearly lost that battle. And what we keep learning is that when we fight him, we can win. So we need to do it more often across many more fronts. But I think that what's not happened yet, Stuart, is the gravity of the crisis has not really become clear in our daily discourse. And I think we're lagging a little bit about the gravity because I think people thought it would just end. And so, but it hasn't. And in fact, there is no easy ending here. It's a lot of bad options in front of the United States. So we've got to get through this immediate crisis. And it's why Schumer and Jeffries and our national security Democrats need to really stand up here and try to help lead the nation through what is now becoming a very serious, both domestic and global crisis.
Yeah, at the heart of this, well, a lot of things are at the heart, but one is just a deep inability to respect other people, to respect Iran. I mean, I went to grad school with a lot of Iranians, and I've lived in Los Angeles, which is the second largest Iranian community outside of, I guess, the largest Iranian community outside of Iran. I mean, this is, extraordinarily impressive, entrepreneurial, educated, sophisticated empire that they had. So we're just going to go over there and just tell them what to do. Donald Trump saying that he should pick the next leader of Iran. I mean, it's beyond childish, and it really. If you step back from, I'm so glad you're talking about sort of the depth of the crisis, because if you step back from it and you had a list of how would you go about weakening America in the short term and long term, I don't really know what Donald Trump and the Republicans have done that doesn't meet these criteria. I mean, everything from, we're trying to gut any scientific research. We're putting in handcuffs future biochemists, the kind of people that we should be begging to come to America. We're at war with Iran. I mean, and we have a president who's surprised about the Strait of Hormuz. Like,
I know.
Really?
Dude, he keeps saying nobody thought that this was going to work out like this.
Obviously, the guy never played Risk. Because it's right there in front of you, dude. That's all you had to do. You didn't have to go to the war college. And you have, we talked about this, these Russian thugs allowed to come back in the country when they should be arrested when they step off a plane. And why are they here? They're here because they know that they can gain intelligence and use it against it. And we have now, Russia is killing Americans, trying to, and they're succeeding. They're helping with targeting. And yet, this is a pro-Russian administration.
Yeah, we relaxed sanctions. We now relaxed multiple sanctions on Russia. We've relaxed the sanctions on Iran, and we've relaxed sanctions on the Venezuelan leader. So in the last 2 weeks, if you're, we've not only relaxed repeated sanctions on Russia, allowing them to profit from the higher oil prices, but and operate more freely in the global economy again. But we've also relaxed sanctions on their Iranian partners and their Venezuelan partners, because in both cases, and this may go back to Trump's compromise with Russia, Trump didn't actually get rid of the pro-Russian regime in Venezuela. They're still there. And he also wasn't going to get rid of the pro-Russian regime in Iran either. He sort of floated with the regime change, but then he started talking about the Maduro model, and he'll just find compliant people to take over the government like he did in Venezuela. And so all of a sudden you have Trump doing a series of things to make Russia and Iran and their allies great again, rather than what was the stated purpose, which is to weaken them. And I wondered, Stuart, because the last time we got together, you had just come back from Ukraine. And I'm wondering if you can reflect on what's happened with Zelensky in the last month, now becoming a global statesman and, going now, he's in Syria. Yesterday, I think he's been in the UAE and Qatar and in Saudi Arabia, being treated like a partner and a hero, signing long-term security agreements with these countries because they have a common enemy in Russia, Iran. What's your reflection on seeing Zelensky step up in this remarkable moment?
You remember when Republicans used to say character's destiny, character is king. Peggy Noonan's biography of Reagan, when character was king. That's what's playing out here. Donald Trump has a character. It's just a despicable character. Zelensky is the great man of our times. And he's Churchill without the drinking in our midst. And people respond to that. People follow courage. People follow conviction. People follow fighting for something other than yourself. And all of those traits Zelensky embodies, in sort of a JFK way, inspirational. And I wrote about this. Think about what it's like if you grow up in Ukraine now. You have these role models, and they're people you know. They're your brothers, your sisters, and almost every Ukrainian family has lost someone or has had someone who has been a casualty in the war in one way or the other. And you see this leader. You can be proud of your country. You grow up in America now. How can you be proud of a country that is represented by Donald Trump, Stephen Miller, J.D. Vance? I mean, so of course we have these youngish Republicans, they're not kids, who are all in this pro-Nazi stuff, and you have J.D. Vance defending them. That's all they've known. It's a decade. And I just think that, Charles Krauthammer used to use this phrase that I thought was so brilliant, that, when we ignored the peril of a dangerous world, that we had taken a holiday from history. And I think the idea that we're taking a holiday from history to believe that we can have a decade of this virus in America that is so corrosive and it not have long-term ramifications. And it's just so deeply sad. But listen, man, it's up to Democrats to save us from this, because, take John Cornyn. I've known John Cornyn forever. I worked for him when he ran for Attorney General, Senate. And I don't recognize that person now. He was thoughtful, even had doubts about running for office because, he was on the Supreme Court and he thought it was an intellectually challenging, important job, and like politics, I don't know. So now he's going to lose to Paxton. Talk about a Faustian bargain. And what people forget is not only does Mephistophelies take your soul, he doesn't deliver. So, John Cornyn, I can't tell you what would happen to his career if he had stood up to Trump and been who John Cornyn always said that he was. But I can tell you he'd be a lot more respected. Who's going to respect the person who lost to Paxton? Really, it's that. I look at Roger Wicker, my old friend from Mississippi, who I also worked for. I don't see how you could argue with the thesis that Roger Wicker is on track to be the most destructive chairman of the Armed Services Committee in modern history. Look what's happening to the military on his watch. And he, ushered in Pete Hegseth, wouldn't have even hearings on it. He didn't have to do that. So, look, I think in a big sense, there was a time when Democrats very much were the muscular foreign policy party. And I think this is an opportunity for Democrats to regain. I think they are regaining it.
Yeah.
It's not only an opportunity, I think it's happening. That's the hopeful front. The negative front is if you read Timothy Snyder, who's saying, look, brilliant man. We need to stop thinking about, need to start asking ourselves, what are we going to do if Trump does cancel elections?
Yeah. And Stuart, let me talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
Is that, because I wrote a piece yesterday with referring to that column that Timothy Snyder wrote, and also to some of Anne Applebaum's recent writing about Hungary and other things. I think we have to start from a place now where we assume that they're not going to allow a peaceful transfer of power in January of 2027, that they will try to prevent there from being a free and fair election, that they will invite hostile foreign powers in to help them stay in power, that they will use, this unprecedented corruption that we've seen to put unprecedented amounts of money into the political system, which is already, we saw this today with the Senate buy. I mean, to have a $350 million buy happen this early in the cycle is just kind of mind-boggling. And that's not even, the AI PAC or the other AI PAC or the Trump PAC or, the other organizations that will be spending to keep them in power. We have to just accept that this is the playing field of this election. This is the battleground of this election, and devise a plan to succeed in this. To your point that you were raising earlier, it's not to pretend that this isn't happening or to wish it away, because we're up against something that no party in American history has really been up against before, which is we're running against a political party that doesn't believe in rule of law and democracy, and that are not going to feel bound by traditional law and conventions of democracy in the way they execute what's going to come. I'm not scared by this. What I'm scared by is I would only be scared right now is if we weren't planning and there wasn't conversations about it and we weren't laying the groundwork with the American people for all the fuckery that's to come, because I think people will believe that Trump is capable of all of this. Why? Because he did work with the Russians to influence the election in 2016. He did lead an insurrection and tried to overturn an election in 2021. These things have already happened. These aren't hypotheticals. We're seeing it play out with Orban in Hungary right now, which is an early test of the Trump-Putin alliance for what they may bring here, in November. What I think is different now is that at least for right now, in the more in the elite circles, the early adopters of this discourse, we're now openly talking about this, which is going to give us. We're not denying it. We're not pretending Russia, like these things aren't going to happen, right? Like immediate, that this is part of the political landscape. And I think you, as a strategist, and you've worked in campaigns, every election there's a new battlefield. You have to adapt to it. You have to learn and devise strategies to win in it. We have to accept that this is what's going to happen and continue, and not play off of an old playbook, because then we may be surprised again on election after the day after the election, like we have been in other elections. And I don't want that to happen again. And so I think what Timothy Snyder is challenging us, and Ruth Ben-Ghiat and Ann Applebaum, is for us to start talking to the American people, talking to journalists and influencers about what is going to happen here, and to normalize it so that when it starts to happen, we're not sort of having a debate about whether this is what's happening. This is going to be part of our election, whether we like it or not. And we need to start, socializing the idea that we're going to be operating in a new battlefield and still be able to prevail and win in it. Because the truth is, as you know, there's limits to what ad dollars can get you when the wave is moving against you. Trump is completely capable of fucking everything up as he is executing well, because he screws up everything he touches, right? The assumption that they're going to mount some kind of Death Star as opposed to the bedraggled, completely incoherent mess that he is not a given. And so we shouldn't assume and give him powers. I think the last thing I'll say to you about this, Stuart, and this is very consistent with the conversations we always have. When we talk about the election and the current politics, Trump is weak, the Republicans are struggling. When we talk about this election stuff, the cheating, all of a sudden he becomes strong again and we become weak. We can't fall into that, right? We have to continue to view him and these illicit tactics he's going to use as a signal of his weakness and his frailty and his Epstein desperation, and not as a sign of strength and power. And so I think that, but part of what Timothy Snyder and others are doing, they're doing a great service to us, is that we know from other countries that have been through this, that prophylactically explaining to the public about the tactics they're using, exposing them in real time, educating the public is an essential tool to prevent these tactics from being successful. And I think we're moving as a family into that posture more aggressively. I really do want to just acknowledge the work of people like Mark Elias and Norm Eisen and Skye Perriman and others and the attorneys general and the secretaries of state who've been on the front lines organizing against this. But now I think this has to become a whole of family project. Just like funding our candidates, winning the election, the traditional election, has to be a whole family project. Helping expose the illicit tactics and defanging them also has to become now something that we learn and do together. I still think that we will come out of this on the right side of history, but not unless we understand the battlefield that we're on and develop a strategy to prevail in it, like we do in any election, Stuart.
Yeah, I think this is where American exceptionalism really cuts both ways for us.
I agree.
Because our inability to imagine Donald Trump has always played to Donald Trump's strengths. Certainly I couldn't imagine him winning the Republican primary because the Republicans were not going to nominate a guy that talked in public about having sex with his daughter. It wasn't going to happen, Then it did. I didn't think he'd win the general election, but he did. I didn't think he'd come back, but he did. And I think that inability to imagine has always been a great strength. That trio that you just reeled off, Timothy Snyder, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, Ann Applebaum. I mean, I go around giving out their books like Watchtowers, random strangers, like Twilight of Democracy. Have you read this? Because you need to right now. They have such a scope of history. I mean, Anne Applebaum lives in Poland, married to a former Polish Minister of Defense, American, but spent a lot of time in Europe. Timothy Snyder, who, I think there's maybe 3 languages that he doesn't speak, married to a woman who is from Eastern Europe. And Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who has been studying this and talking about it. And I think it is so important that we embrace the unimaginable, because the unimaginable becomes inevitable if you don't embrace it.
Amen. That's a great, I'm going to steal that phrase and credit you the rest of the election, is that, we suffered from failure of imagination in 2016 and in 2020 and 2024. And, we can't do that anymore. And I think that, part of what this new independent media that we are all creating together, Stuart, allows us to do is it allows us to air stuff out. It allows us to, kick stuff around, to act like rump groups or as test hothouses or whatever the word is you used, to throw out ideas. I mean, I view Hopium, when I write Hopium every day, I view it as like a sketch pad, right? Like I'm just throwing stuff out there. This is what I'm seeing today. And if it's useful to you, go with it. And I think this is where our elected leaders,
which by the way is what Thomas Paine did exactly. But anyway,
well, I mean, but it's where our elected leaders, I think, should understand how to benefit from this churn of all of our collective work every day. I mean, Timothy Snyder is not just who he is, but he's using independent media tools to reach more people. Right. So is Ruth Ben-Ghiat, and Anne is still operating in sort of the more traditional media environment, but doing incredible.
Heather Cox Richardson.
Heather Cox, I mean, how did we forget her, right? She's the godmother of them all, right? We all wouldn't be here without her. We all need a little statue of Heather, in our.
One of the more hopeful signs of our society is that an obscure history professor can find an audience of 5 million subscribers and make a ton of money doing it and speak the truth. And I think that is such a great, beautiful thing.
We were remiss by leaving out Heather, because there is none of this. She really is in some ways the godfather of all this independent media. I mean, her ability to succeed on Substack created, it gave me the confidence that I could have launched Hopium 3 years ago, and that there was an audience for this kind of stuff. And so I do think, Leader Jeffries and Leader Schumer and our governors have benefited from this churn and from having to engage with all of us, right? In these unscripted conversations that aren't 4 minutes long, that allow them to say their talking points and get off and, give the big thumbs up to the comms director as they get off stage, if they get off camera, right? And I think this is where, this work we've all been together has been so necessary and vital in a time of challenge for the country. And I certainly am trying every day to help us. I had an old friend who used to describe my work as Simon's trying to figure out how to take the next hill, right? And that's, because that's what strategy is about, right? It's like chess. You've got to start moving multiple pieces ahead, and we know where they're going. And shame on us if we don't figure out how to prevent them from getting there, which is what every election is about, right? Oftentimes, Stuart, where the other guy's going to go and how they're going to come after you, because you see it in your own data. Your job is to prevent that from being successful, right? And so I'm a little bit more sanguine about this than I was perhaps a few months ago, about the family kind of waking up to the way, as I describe it, the battlefield that's in front of us. But I just think one thing we have to keep in mind at all times is Trump just fails and fails and fails and fails. Like, his batting average is, he's lost so many legal cases, right? Yes, the strategy is to throw as much at us as we can, and 30% of it is going to get through while we block 70% and use up all of our time and money to block all the bad things he's doing. But this guy has, his economic strategy has failed. DHS, ICE has been a political failure for them. The war is an incredible failure. Their redistricting plan was an incredible failure. We beat them in that head-to-head fight, it looks like, if we win in Virginia in a couple of weeks. We should not assume success, because there's been far more failure in Trump's life than there's been success in many ways, in my view, when you add up the scorecard. He's had some big wins. We can't deny that. There's also been just incredible amount of failure and losses. And so we should not assume as we go into this election fight that he'll be successful. I think it's far more likely that we will be, but only if we have the right strategy. And also, one of the things that people have to kind of start taking ownership of is they do have a lot more money than we do this cycle, and they're starting to spend it. And people need to get off the sidelines and start funding the party committees and the candidates that they admire and respect, because we are going to get outspent for the first time in a long time. And money's been a little slow, and we need to change that in the next couple months.
Well, one of my favorite moments in politics is when Arch Moore, governor of West Virginia, was running against Rockefeller, and they had bumper stickers that said, "Make him spend it all, Arch." That's the way I feel.
Stuart, you need to find, you should at Lincoln Square, you should start selling those. That could become part of your merch.
You think $345 billion worth of television is going to do it? Television is dumb bombs in a drone war that we're in now. Well, listen, brother, thank you.
I got to go. And
everybody out there, if you're not a paying subscriber to the Hopium Chronicles, your life is empty and meaningless, and you need to change it immediately. And support Lincoln Square. We are the people who are going to have to save ourselves. So thank you, Simon, and thank you for everything you do. And look forward to talking again soon.
Yeah, Stuart, thank you. And please, everybody, do support Lincoln Square. They've had a phenomenal last 12 months and growing by leaps and bounds and producing incredibly high quality content every day. And so it's been fun. And Stuart and I get together once a month. First Monday, if our schedules work out, we hang out. I'll host you next time. You hosted me today. I always look forward to these conversations. This is some of the most fun I have during this challenging time. So Stuart, thanks for everything. Right. And I want to say one last thing. Thank you for your work on Ukraine. I still need to schedule a call with you. I would like Hopium to adopt a single Ukrainian project. And I just want to get some advice from you about how to think about that.
That it is the moral test of our times. I don't know. It's hard to even talk about this. When I was in Kyiv, it was relatively quiet. It was a quiet period when I was in Kyiv, but I would go on these runs, and one of the runs took me just by coincidence, and I didn't realize at the time, this veterinary office, what do you call a vet's office, that the Russians sent a drone into to kill pets. And these horrible scenes from Ukraine of people trying to save these pets coming out of it. That's what it's come down to. And we let these Russian monsters in our country instead of arresting them. It's just unimaginable. All right, brother. We look forward to that. We'll talk more about it. Okay.
See everybody. Keep fighting all. Take care.
Take care. Bye.